Why are today's kids struggling to grow up despite access to therapy and support like never before? It's a tough question, one that might make you stop and think. With mental health resources more widespread than ever in schools, parents, and professionals placing unprecedented focus on emotional well-being, shouldn't the younger generation be thriving? And yet, we're seeing record levels of anxiety, depression, and a pervasive sense of helplessness among today's youth. In this video, we'll dive into Abigail Shrier's thought-provoking book Bad Therapy: Why the Kids Aren't Growing Up. Shrier shines a light on the unintended consequences of modern therapy culture and the rise of what some call therapeutic parenting. By prioritizing happiness above all else and rushing to shield kids from discomfort or failure, have we accidentally stunted their growth? Are we teaching resilience or just reinforcing fragility? Shrier explores how overdiagnosis, quick fixes, and an excessive focus on trauma have created a generation that is less prepared to tackle the challenges of adulthood. From schools doubling down on therapeutic interventions to parenting trends that center on immediate emotional validation, this book examines how well-intentioned efforts to protect children may actually be undermining their independence and confidence. If you've ever wondered why kids today are described as lonelier, more anxious, and less equipped to face the world than previous generations, you won't want to miss this. Together, we'll question some of the deeply ingrained ideas about what it means to raise and support a child in the 21st century. Is there a better way forward? Let's explore what Shrier has uncovered and how it might reshape the way we think about helping kids grow not just in age, but in resilience and independence. Therapy is supposed to help us heal, but what if it's making things worse? What if the very thing designed to support our mental health is, in some cases, quietly undermining it? This concept isn't as far-fetched as it sounds. In fact, there's a name for it: iatrogenesis, the unintended harm caused by medical or therapeutic interventions. In her book Bad Therapy: Why the Kids Aren't Growing Up, Abigail Shrier explores how therapy, though well-intentioned, can sometimes backfire. She explains that therapy isn't always the benign, feel-good process we imagine. Like any powerful intervention, it carries risks, particularly when it comes to children and adolescents. Unlike adults, kids often lack the ability to challenge a therapist's view or even recognize when the treatment is doing more harm than good. Shrier shares examples of how therapy can foster dependency, leaving children reliant on their therapist's interpretations instead of developing their own problem-solving skills. Imagine a teenager who is told that their struggles stem from oppositional defiant disorder or social anxiety disorder rather than being guided to navigate life's challenges independently. These labels can reshape a child's self-perception in damaging ways, trapping them in a cycle of perceived dysfunction. Shrier also highlights how therapy can overdiagnose normal behaviors or misinterpret typical adolescent struggles as serious disorders. For instance, parents might send their child to therapy after a breakup or an argument with friends, hoping to smooth over their discomfort. But instead of helping kids build resilience, this approach can make them believe they are broken or incapable of handling life's ups and downs without professional intervention. Therapy, then, stops being a tool for growth and instead becomes a crutch. And it doesn't end there. Shrier points to studies showing that therapy can sometimes intensify negative emotions. In one striking example, group therapy sessions for trauma victims were found to heighten symptoms of PTSD rather than alleviate them. Even one-on-one therapy can leave patients overly focused on their problems, leading to a spiral of sadness rather than recovery. It's important to remember that therapy is not inherently bad. For many people, it provides life-changing support. But Shrier's argument forces us to ask tough questions. Is therapy always the right solution? Are we over-relying on therapists to solve issues that might resolve naturally with time, support, or life experience? And most critically, are we exposing kids to interventions that may ultimately do more harm than good? As you think about this, ask yourself, when should we lean on therapy, and when should we trust in the resilience of our own minds and those of our children? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think therapy is being overused, or is it the tool we need now more than ever? Why has therapy become so common that it's even in schools? At one point, therapy was something you sought out when life felt overwhelming. Now, it's everywhere in schools, on social media, even in casual conversations. But what happens when therapeutic practices go airborne, infiltrating places and situations where they might not belong? In Bad Therapy, Why the Kids Aren't Growing Up, Abigail Shrier explores how schools have embraced a therapeutic model, shifting from traditional education to emotional monitoring. Mental health screenings, school counselors trained in therapeutic methods, and widespread trauma-informed teaching practices are now the norm. While these efforts come from a good place wanting to support kids, they often lead to unnecessary diagnoses and interventions. Shrier highlights how this therapeutic culture teaches kids to view their struggles not as challenges to overcome but as evidence of dysfunction. This widespread adoption of therapy in schools has contributed to what Shrier calls the rise of social contagions. Disorders once considered rare, like Tourette's syndrome, gender dysphoria, or trichotillomania, hair pulling, are suddenly being adopted by teens at alarming rates. How? Peer influence and social media. A teenager who might simply feel different or isolated stumbles upon a TikTok trend or hears about a friend's diagnosis, and suddenly, they too begin to see their behavior as symptomatic of a disorder. What might once have been a phase or a personal quirk is now framed as something that needs professional intervention. Modern parenting also plays a role in this phenomenon. Many parents today focus on preventing their kids from experiencing discomfort or failure. They rush to smooth every bump in the road, often relying on therapy to address even minor challenges. As a result, kids grow up internalizing the idea that normal struggles like dealing with a tough teacher or feeling sad after a breakup are signs of deeper psychological issues. Instead of building resilience, this approach can unintentionally foster fragility. So, why does this matter? Because when therapy becomes the default response to every emotional dip or social misstep, we risk pathologizing normal human experiences. Not every shy kid has social anxiety. Not every moody teenager is clinically depressed. By embedding therapy into schools and homes in this way, are we helping kids or are we unintentionally creating a generation that feels broken? What do you think? Is this increased focus on mental health the solution we need, or is it creating more problems than it solves? What if our kids don't need fixing but just a different approach to life? In a world where every mood swing is a disorder and every struggle is seen as a problem that needs professional intervention, maybe we're looking at things all wrong. Abigail Shrier's Bad Therapy, Why the Kids Aren't Growing Up challenges us to rethink whether our kids are truly broken or if we're breaking them with how we approach their challenges. Over the last few decades, we've seen an explosion of mental health treatments, therapies, and interventions aimed at kids. Schools have adopted therapeutic practices, diagnoses are more common than ever, and therapy is often seen as the go-to solution for everything from exam stress to everyday sadness. Yet, despite all this attention and support, kids today aren't happier or healthier. In fact, they're reporting record levels of anxiety, depression, and hopelessness. Shrier points to one possible reason: therapy culture. When kids are constantly told they're fragile, that they need help, and that every setback requires intervention, they internalize the idea that they can't handle life on their own. Therapy, while valuable for some, can sometimes lead to dependency. Instead of building resilience, it can undermine it by shifting the focus to diagnosis and treatment rather than growth and adaptation. Take, for example, the rise in young people identifying with disorders they've seen online or heard about from friends. These aren't always rooted in clinical reality but often in a desire to belong or explain away ordinary struggles. The result? Kids who see themselves as broken instead of capable. Parents and schools, though well-meaning, can unintentionally fuel this by rushing to medicate, accommodate, or therapize every challenge instead of letting kids figure things out for themselves. But here's the good news: there's another way. Instead of framing every difficulty as a crisis, we can encourage kids to embrace challenges as opportunities for growth. We can let them fail, stumble, and pick themselves back up. We can shift our focus from solving every problem for them to teaching them how to solve problems on their own. Resilience isn't built through diagnoses, it's built through experience, grit, and learning to trust in one's ability to handle life. So, maybe there's nothing wrong with our kids. Maybe what they need isn't another appointment, but a little more space to grow and a little more faith in their ability to thrive. What do you think? How can we empower kids to develop the self-reliance and emotional strength they need? Share your thoughts below. Are we over-relying on therapy to solve every problem? It's a question Abigail Shrier raises in Bad Therapy, Why the Kids Aren't Growing Up, and her answer is a thought-provoking critique of modern mental health culture. While therapy can be a life-saving tool for some, Shrier argues that it's increasingly being used as a catch-all solution, even for normal struggles that are just part of growing up. One of Shrier's key critiques is that many therapists fail to acknowledge the risks of their methods. Therapy, she explains, is not always the benign process we imagine. It has the potential to cause harm, whether through fostering dependency, overdiagnosing normal behaviors, or labeling kids with disorders that reshape their self-identity. For example, she points out how common it's become for children to walk into therapy with minor challenges, only to emerge with diagnoses that make them believe they're fundamentally broken. What's driving this? Shrier highlights how therapy has evolved from a targeted intervention into a default response for nearly every difficulty. Schools, parents, and even pop culture reinforce the message that if you're struggling, therapy is the answer. But she cautions against this over-reliance. Not every shy kid needs a social anxiety diagnosis, and not every disappointment needs professional intervention. By pathologizing ordinary challenges, we risk teaching kids that they can't handle life on their own. So, what's the alternative? Shrier emphasizes the importance of balanced parenting, raising kids who are allowed to face discomfort, fail, and grow from their experiences. She also encourages skepticism toward the overmedication and overdiagnosis that have become so prevalent in our culture. Instead of jumping to solutions like therapy or medication, she suggests we take a step back and ask, is this really necessary? Can we guide kids through this without making them feel like they're flawed? This perspective challenges us to reevaluate our own attitudes toward mental health and parenting. Therapy is not the enemy, but neither is it always the right answer. The key is balance, providing support when it's truly needed while fostering resilience and independence in our kids. So, what do you think? Are we turning to therapy too quickly, or is it an essential tool in today's world? So, what can we actually learn from all of this? Abigail Shrier's Bad Therapy, Why the Kids Aren't Growing Up delivers some tough but essential lessons about modern therapy culture, parenting, and the way we approach mental health. Let's break it down into key insights that parents, educators, and even young people can use to rethink their approach. First, therapy is not a one-size-fits-all solution. While it can be transformative in the right circumstances, it should be approached with caution. Overdiagnosing normal struggles or using therapy as the default response can unintentionally create more harm than good. Not every bad day or tough experience requires professional intervention. Sometimes, the best response is patience, guidance, and trust in a child's ability to work through challenges. Second, resilience is built through overcoming adversity, not avoiding it. Kids grow when they face life's bumps and learn to navigate them. Shielding children from failure or discomfort might feel protective in the moment, but it can rob them of the chance to develop independence and confidence. Shrier's critique reminds us that stepping back and letting kids stumble is a critical part of helping them grow strong. Third, overprotection can harm emotional growth. When every setback is treated like a crisis, we send a message to kids that they're fragile and incapable. Instead, we should be focusing on equipping them with tools to handle life's inevitable difficulties, tools like problem-solving skills, emotional regulation, and the confidence to bounce back after failure. Ultimately, this book challenges us to think critically about how we approach mental health, both for ourselves and for the younger generation. Therapy and support should always be available, but they should be applied thoughtfully, not reflexively. So, how do you approach mental health in your own life or with your kids? Are there ways you could better foster resilience and independence? Why are kids today struggling despite the rise of therapy and mental health awareness? It's a question we've explored throughout this video, and Abigail Shrier's Bad Therapy, Why the Kids Aren't Growing Up offers some thought-provoking answers. Shrier argues that the very tools we've embraced to help kids, therapy, diagnoses, and even modern parenting, might sometimes be holding them back. Overdiagnosis can redefine normal struggles as disorders, overmedication can stifle growth, and over-reliance on therapy can undermine resilience. But this doesn't mean therapy is bad or unnecessary, it means we need to use it thoughtfully. Kids don't need to be fixed, they need the chance to grow, to fail, and to learn how to navigate life's challenges without always looking for a diagnosis or a quick solution. So, where do we go from here? Let's start by rethinking how we support the next generation. Let's focus on fostering independence, resilience, and the confidence to face life head-on. It's not about throwing out therapy or mental health awareness, it's about finding the right balance. What do you think? Are we too quick to lean on therapy, or is it exactly what today's kids need? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so share them in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you found this video insightful. Let's continue the conversation about how we can truly help kids grow up stronger, happier, and ready to take on the world.